Foreign policy is a tapestry of interconnected strategies, decisions, and outcomes that shape the contours of our global society. The actions of nations often extend beyond their borders, influencing the lives of millions and forging alliances or animosities that can last for generations. Among the many arenas of foreign policy, North Korea, the Middle East, and NATO represent particularly critical areas that demand attention and careful analysis. Each region or institution carries its own unique set of challenges, reflecting the diverse but interdependent realities of international relations. North Korea remains a persistent enigma on the global stage. Isolated yet determined to assert itself as a nuclear power, its actions have profound implications for regional and global stability. The nation's ongoing missile tests, often timed to coincide with major diplomatic events elsewhere, send a clear signal of its intentions: to demand recognition and to resist external influence. This behavior forces other nations, particularly South Korea, Japan, and the United States, into a defensive posture. The United Nations has imposed sanctions aimed at crippling North Korea's economy, but their success has been limited. Black market trade and illicit financial networks continue to provide the regime with resources, complicating the international community's ability to curtail its ambitions. The question of whether diplomacy with North Korea is viable remains hotly debated. The historical record is filled with examples of agreements that faltered due to mistrust or outright violations by Pyongyang. The summits between Kim Jong-un and former U.S. President Donald Trump, for instance, captured global attention, but ultimately yielded few concrete results. While proponents of engagement argue that dialogue is the only way to prevent escalation, critics warn that such talks often provide North Korea with time to advance its military capabilities while offering little in return. The dilemma underscores the broader challenge of dealing with authoritarian regimes that prioritize survival and power over cooperation. In the Middle East, the challenges are vast and multifaceted, rooted in centuries of history, culture, and conflict. Iran's nuclear program remains one of the most contentious issues in international relations. For years, efforts to negotiate a resolution have oscillated between moments of progress and breakdowns in trust. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, was hailed as a major achievement when it was signed in 2015, only to face setbacks after the United States withdrew in 2018. The current attempts to revive the deal highlight the complexities of balancing competing interests. While the West seeks to limit Iran's nuclear capabilities, Tehran demands relief from crippling sanctions that have devastated its economy. At the same time, the Middle East continues to grapple with long-standing conflicts that defy resolution. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains a poignant example of how deeply entrenched disputes can perpetuate cycles of violence and mistrust. Despite numerous attempts at peace negotiations, fundamental disagreements over borders, security, and the status of Jerusalem have left both sides locked in a seemingly unending struggle. This conflict, often viewed as a microcosm of the region's broader tensions, reflects the difficulty of achieving compromise in a politically charged environment. The emergence of the Abraham Accords has introduced a new dimension to Middle Eastern diplomacy. The normalization of relations between Israel and countries like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain signals a potential shift in regional dynamics. By fostering economic partnerships and encouraging dialogue, these agreements could pave the way for greater cooperation across the region. However, they have also drawn criticism for sidelining the Palestinian cause and prioritizing bilateral gains over broader regional peace. The success or failure of these accords will likely depend on whether they can be expanded to include more nations and whether they address the root causes of instability. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crises in Yemen and Syria serve as stark reminders of the devastating consequences of prolonged conflict. Yemen's civil war has left millions on the brink of famine, with children bearing the brunt of the suffering. International aid efforts, while critical, are often hindered by the ongoing fighting and the logistical challenges of delivering supplies in a war zone. In Syria, years of conflict have decimated the country's infrastructure, displaced millions, and created a complex web of alliances and rivalries. The involvement of multiple foreign powers has further complicated efforts to achieve a lasting peace. leaving the Syrian people to endure the fallout of geopolitical maneuvering. As these challenges unfold, NATO remains a cornerstone of Western security architecture, but its relevance and unity are constantly being tested. The alliance was originally formed to counter the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but its mission has evolved to address a range of modern threats. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has reaffirmed NATO's importance as member states work together to deter Russian aggression. The collective defense principle enshrined in Article 5 of NATO's charter has become a rallying point, reminding member nations of their shared commitment to one another's security. However, NATO is not without its internal struggles. The differing priorities and perspectives of its members often create friction. Countries like Poland and the Baltic states prioritize a strong response to Russian threats, while Western European nations may focus more on diplomacy or economic considerations. Turkey, a critical NATO member with a unique geopolitical position, frequently pursues policies that diverge from the alliance's consensus, adding another layer of complexity. Despite these challenges, NATO's ability to adapt to emerging threats, such as cyber attacks and the weaponization of energy, will determine its future relevance. Beyond these specific regions and institutions, the broader challenges of foreign policy reflect the growing interconnectedness of the world. Climate change, for example, is increasingly recognized as a security issue, with its potential to exacerbate resource conflicts and trigger mass migrations. Similarly, the rise of artificial intelligence and other advanced technologies poses both opportunities and risks for international stability. As nations compete for dominance in these fields, questions about regulation, ethics, and collaboration will become central to the global agenda. The importance of multilateralism cannot be overstated in addressing these complex issues. Organizations like the United Nations, the European Union, and ASEAN play crucial roles in facilitating dialogue and coordinating responses to shared challenges. However, the effectiveness of these institutions often hinges on the willingness of member states to set aside short-term interests in favor of long-term stability. The tension between national sovereignty and collective action remains a persistent obstacle to achieving meaningful progress. In this intricate landscape, leadership matters. The choices made by policymakers today will shape the world for generations to come. Whether it is finding ways to engage North Korea without legitimizing its regime, fostering a more inclusive and sustainable peace in the Middle East, or ensuring NATO remains fit for purpose in a changing world, the stakes are immense. Foreign policy requires not only strategic thinking, but also a commitment to principles and a recognition of our shared humanity. Ultimately, the path forward demands resilience, adaptability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The challenges are formidable, but they are not insurmountable. Through dialogue, cooperation, and a shared commitment to justice and peace, nations have the potential to create a more stable and prosperous world. The decisions made in addressing North Korea, the Middle East, and NATO are not isolated events. They are chapters in a larger narrative of global interdependence. It is up to the international community to ensure that this narrative is one of progress, not regression.